Hi, I'm Chase Drum. I'm the West Coast correspondent for Autoline. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Allen. He's the executive director of Fourth, based in Portland, Oregon. Jeff, it's great to have you today.
Great to be with you, Chase.
My pleasure. Well, I think for people who might not be familiar with Fourth, could you share a little bit about your organization and where you've come from and what you guys are working on today?
Sure. Well, Fourth is kind of an interesting organization. We were created back in 2011, actually as part of the state of Oregon's Economic Development Initiative, designed to grow the industry and attract investment to Oregon. And we've grown and evolved from there. So we used to be called Drive Oregon originally back in 2011 when I was hired as employee number one. And I was not only employee number one, I was the only employee at that point. And since then, we've grown to an organization that's working all over the country and internationally. We have about 28 employees now, and we work in a lot of different areas. And we actually are two organizations. So Fourth is a trade association, and then we have an affiliated charitable organization called the Fourth Mobility Fund.
And with those two organizations, I know part of it with the trade association, you do have ongoing right now webinars and other real world events. What are the best ways for people to engage with you for either of those sides of Fourth?
Yeah, absolutely. So really a core piece of our work remains that industry development. We really like to be the connective tissue for this whole ecosystem, because electric mobility is not just about a different drivetrain in a vehicle. It's really about a whole new business model. So folks can sign up for our email newsletter, which goes to about 5,000 industry folks. We would love to have more organizations join Fourth as members. We have about 200 members, and that includes most of the major automakers, most of the charging companies, a number of electric utilities, government agencies, consulting firms, mobility companies like Uber, Lyft, Bird. Really, it's the entire ecosystem, as I said. And then we also offer webinars. Normally, this time of year, we would be hosting our signature conference, the Roadmap Conference, with about 1,500 people here in Portland. Since we can't do that, we're doing a digital version of that this week with webinars. And all of those webinars are recorded and available free on our website as well.
Yeah, that's great. I had the pleasure to attend a couple of the EV roadmaps previously, and it is really impressive. As you mentioned, it started in Oregon, but now you have pretty much everyone joining from all over the world for these events and some of them are previous guests on Autoline speak there and get to kind of highlight what's going on in the industry. For you, can you share a little bit of what the impact Fourth has made and just how the EV landscape has evolved since you first started back in 2011?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. So when I started, thinking back, it was the early days of Uber. A lot of people hadn't even heard of it. The only electric vehicles were the Tesla Roadster and the Leaf and the Volt. So it was a different world back then. And we've seen evolution in a bunch of areas, and our organization has really tried to evolve with the industry to do what's needed. So we started with this networking function. Early on, we actually made grants to companies to help them develop new products and bring them to market. And then we got involved in public policy advocacy and pushing for things like electric vehicle rebates, incentives, utility involvement in the space. Then we moved on to demonstration and pilot projects, because a lot of what we have to do is show how this technology works in practice and bring together these different stakeholders to figure out how it could work in practice. And then the last thing we've added is direct consumer engagement, because we realized, I fought this for years because I didn't want to be the guy at the farmer's market with his electric car. But we figured out that it really wasn't anybody's job to sell electric mobility as a category, right? And if you don't do that, it's really like trying to promote bicycle commuting and leaving that all up to Trek to do all of that work. You really need someone whose job it is in a brand neutral way to say, hey, you should drive electric, whichever model car you'd like. And so now we run a showroom in downtown Portland. We do dozens of ride and drives in a normal year. And so our work has really evolved along with the industry and what the industry needs.
Yeah, with that, how do most people come across Fourth? Is it kind of word of mouth? Is it the physical locations, or is it kind of a mixture of getting in front of people through different mediums?
It's why I'm here, Chase. Yeah, it's we've to some extent been a well kept secret. I would say. I think most people encounter us through events, whether it's webinars or a roadmap conference, in terms of folks in the industry. Um, but we also a number of these demonstration projects and pilot projects have attracted some attention. So for example, we ran one of the first electric car share pilot projects for low income communities here in Portland to try and figure out a more sustainable business model for that. We are now about to launch kind of the next version of that in Hood River, which is, as you know well, a really interesting rural kind of community east of Portland, where we're trying to figure out a business model that could basically use tourist dollars to cross subsidize mobility for lower income local folks. So sometimes those projects get people's attention. Sometimes it's a conference or an event. Sometimes it's our policy work. And then we just do our best to keep in touch with folks once we get to know them.
Oh, that's great to hear. I think kind of going off of that, there's been a lot of things done over the years with kind of different ways of getting in front of people, whether that's like in California, they launched a big thing I think that got people's attention originally was the ability to have HOV access. Are there any things that you kind of see on the horizon or that you found that are being really effective today for getting people either at least interested or actually kind of making the plunge and buying a EV today?
Yeah, this has been a real um, interesting challenge and a major piece of our work, as I said, is how do you tackle the fact that even in California, which has half the electric vehicles in the country, only about half of consumers have ever heard and can successfully name an electric vehicle model. So that consumer engagement, public awareness piece continues to be a huge challenge. And I like to say it's a different challenge. So if you can imagine, when I started in 2011, the perception of electric vehicles for a lot of people was, oh, that's a golf cart that has no power. I would
Right.
never want that. And within a couple of years, it transitioned to, oh, that's a Tesla. It's great, but it's ridiculously expensive and I could never afford one. So that's a better challenge from a communication standpoint, but it's still a huge challenge to say, no, there's really affordable electric cars. There's high performance electric cars. So, we've tried a number of different things. I do think HOV access in areas that have HOV lanes like California is a big deal. There were a number of studies that found that the HOV sticker was actually worth more than the couple of $1,000s that people got from the state in terms of an incentive. Some places around the world have experimented, like in Norway, which is the leader in the world. They've had free parking for electric vehicles, which gets people's attention, free fares on the ferries and things like that. There are various other ideas floating around out there, like allowing higher speed limits for electric vehicles or specialty plates for electric vehicles. And personally, I think we need to keep trying anything and everything until we find things that stick. And there's probably going to be different things for different market segments. Personally, I'm still, and I think a lot of people are really excited about getting the electric pickup trucks onto the market and more electric SUVs.
Right, and I think that's a big area where Fourth has done a great job is I think electric vehicles kind of have gotten a bit of a bad stereotype as maybe being only a solution in cities. But Fourth, I think,
Yeah.
does a really good job of addressing mobility across not only like location, but of course, even different demographics and really making it accessible to everyone. So it's not just always the stereotype of the really expensive performance electric vehicle, but there's smaller things too, like everything from electric bikes to having those kind of programs that are more accessible for people in rural areas. And I think that's really a great area that Fourth has been able to bring this kind of education to make it a lot easier to get that information out. One you mentioned is the EV roadmap, which will be online this year. Can you share with some of the other upcoming events that Fourth is putting on that you're excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing these roadmap webinars. We've also upped our overall schedule of webinars and digital content, as I think everyone has in these times. We are starting to form more partnerships with other organizations to bring EV content into those forums. One that we're really excited about that we announced a few weeks ago is a partnership with SETS to provide transportation electrification content at National Smart Energy Week this fall. So we're looking more at those kinds of partnerships to get out of the Northwest, get around the country, and partner with existing conferences and gatherings of utility folks or other audiences that need to hear about what's coming in transportation electrification. And then one other I want to highlight is we had scheduled this week a full day conference on equity in electric mobility, which we've had to reschedule to November 20th. But I think particularly with the events of the last few weeks, we've all been reminded of how far we have to go as a country in tackling institutional racism. And that's true wherever we are, whether we're dealing with police systems or criminal justice system or transportation. And a lot of the history of transportation investments, things like redlining and the way that freeways were punched through communities of color, there's a lot of reckoning to do there. And there's a lot of opportunity for these technologies to disrupt that history. So I'm really excited that we're going to have a whole day in November to really dive deep into that. Everything from how do you develop really appropriate outreach and marketing campaigns around electric mobility in communities of color, traditionally underserved communities, to how do our own organizations need to change to be more inclusive and to tackle these problems. So that's a partnership with a group called EV Noir, and we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I know that's a big concern for a lot of people of how to really address those, and really does, like I said, it's one of the areas I've always been impressed with Force. It's really looking at electric vehicles and electric mobility in general, just across the board to make sure everyone really has a seat at the table. With that, I just want to say thank you again, Jeff. For people who are interested in learning more, they can go to fourthmobility.org to look at all their different webinars and other content that they share online. And with that, I'll let you get going. And thanks again for your time today.
Great. Always a pleasure, Jace.
Thank you.